Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins. It is May 7th, and we are talking San Diego Wave, sitting in third, coming off a brutal 2024. Big turnaround, twofold kind of resurgence in roster and in style of play. I love watching this team play, and I didn't expect that. Let's jump into it. So, the San Diego Wave sitting in third place in the NWSL standings after 7 games played. Even want to shout out that they're actually ahead of a couple of teams that have played 8 games, which of course we all expected, right? We all said, yeah, sure, San Diego, big year in 2025. They've got 4 wins, 1 draw, 2 losses. Most significantly, they are on a 3-game winning streak, just a complete turnaround from the end of last season, which was a bit of a disaster. And it's not really just the wins. And the early going of an NWSL season, you can look at strength of schedule, you can look at like how things happened, or maybe they gutted out some results and you think, okay, maybe they're tougher than we thought, but still have that next level to go. But really, as encapsulated, I don't know if people caught, and if you didn't, I kind of recommend go on to Paramount Plus, rewatch it. San Diego's game against Bay FC this last weekend, they beat them 2-1. And the product that they're putting on the pitch is really enjoyable to watch. Now, that game was maybe platonic ideal because you're looking at 2 teams that like to move fast. It was end to end. There was a lot of offense, a lot of good passing into the final third. Just a lovely game of NWSL football with a decisive winner at the end. But I was very struck by how much not only we're seeing San Diego get results, but just how much I'm enjoying watching them play, which is really impressive this early in the season, even as we do move closer and closer to sort of that second third of the season. Actually, we're right about there, aren't we? 7 games, 8 games. So to start, a lot of pundits, a lot of analysts, I don't think they were wrong to say that they didn't have high expectations for San Diego this year. I think they are exceeding or perhaps quietly putting together a better campaign than people expected. But the last year was pretty bad. And when you are putting these projections together, you can't kind of ignore some of the bad stuff to go along with some of the solid things that they did in the offseason. I'm going to do a rundown kind of 2024 for the Wave, and it's pretty brutal, frankly. You're looking at like kind of hit after hit after hit on and off the pitch. The team's results after winning the Shield in 2023 really do kind of grind to a halt in 2024. They're struggling to score. The defense isn't as good as it was last year. You're just seeing a lot of drop points. And then somewhere in the midseason, team president Jill Ellis sacks head coach Casey Stoney abruptly in a way that is pretty harsh. It strands Stoney personally as well as professionally. She's talked about this. It's harsh to do to a coach that won you the Shield the year before, your inaugural coach for an expansion team, a coach that seems to be at the very least on the outside well respected and well liked by players and staff and coaches around the world. And then the hits kind of keep on coming after that sort of huge moment of letting Stoney go really harshly. Ellis herself is no longer with the club now. She eventually jumps ship to take a spot at FIFA. Everybody is familiar with the lawsuits that have been involved with the Wave kind of under Ellis's tenure. San Diego itself and the league are being sued by former staff who are alleging a culture of toxicity with Ellis. Ellis herself vehemently denies this. She is countersuing or having a different kind of defamation lawsuit against some of those staff, both alleged and kind of, as you can see, just at the very least dysfunction with allegations of toxicity in that workplace. But she is no longer with the club after seeing ostensibly some pretty serious success on the pitch, but some issues off of it. New general manager Camille Ashton is someone who has been criticized when she came over from Kansas City for some of the ways that she handled player transactions. But she did put together a pretty good team in Kansas City. So the talent ID is there, but it seems like some of the interpersonal stuff based on other players' experiences, not necessarily there. Also kind of seemed from the outside like she got a little bit undercut by the Stoney decision because that was made right when she was joining the team. So you have coaching decisions being made by someone other than the general manager, which we know is not a good way to kind of create an ecosystem or a hierarchy that makes sense for a front office in the NWSL or just in sports in general. After Stoney gets sacked, they bring in former U.S. men's player Landon Donovan to take over as interim. That doesn't feel like a particularly serious experiment either. And then the player dominoes fall, right? US Women's National Team superstar Alex Morgan retires abruptly mid-season, doesn't really get sort of that final hurrah she was hoping for. Abby Dahlkemper, who was one of their premier signings as the team was formed in 2022, transfers out to Bay FC. A lot of these core veterans upon which like the team's existence was based are suddenly gone. And then, as we know, the biggest story surrounding the entire NWSL going into 2025 season was the $1 million transfer of the star defender Naomi Girma, who was San Diego's #1 draft pick, their first draft pick in the history of the club, who saw, great successes both at the club and at the international level. Incredible pickup talent ID by San Diego to go for her as a defender over some other prospects in that draft. But she has been transferred out now. And now San Diego obviously reaps the benefits financially of that. But that's just another player going out looking for a new environment. There are other factors to that decision. But again, San Diego, once again, at a talent deficit. And then the hits keep on coming after Girma. Jaden Shaw gets transferred to North Carolina. So she has an intra-league transfer, which was requested. The club has said that publicly. And the club was also pretty adamant that request had kind of been brewing even before Casey Stoney was let go, which on the club side, that's the club saying like, this is not in reaction to some of these other things that have happened, but also like, if you have another star player who was already kind of having a tough time before those actions were taken, it indicates that the struggles of 2024 didn't really come out of nowhere. So the team on the field is working again at this talent deficit, trying to figure out a new identity. They don't have a permanent head coach. Does not really seem like the Donovan situation is a sustainable one. And they move on from him and he moves on at the end of the season. But the business side also never completely falls through the cracks, which is maybe the basis of some of the success they're seeing this year, which we'll talk about in a little bit, where they still have very strong attendance. They're very well supported in person in San Diego. And the team is also sold for a record at the time of $120 million. So there's new ownership, which is, again, kind of a new wave in the NWSL. The in-person support never really wavers. And that maybe gave San Diego, in terms of their soccer operations, the ability to just say 2024 was a disaster, throw it in the bin. We're starting over with a general manager that is going to make this head coach hire. Again, the processes matter to be conducive to a cohesive soccer structure. Jonas Eidevall comes in as the new head coach. Again, kind of a controversial move. He has sort of a crash out moment in Arsenal. He leaves that team mid-season. He is another personality in England that, you've seen some people clash with. Emma Hayes, you try to see those personal clashes between like Emma Hayes, for example, and Jonas Eidevall. You're like, what's happening here with San Diego? They're kind of, again, taking a big swing on a coach that maybe isn't the right personality to bring in with a locker room that is sort of reeling from these different departures and these different changes. And yet things are going really, really well. And the final kind of part of this to talk about 2024, I'm not sitting here and saying that the team's success this year delegitimizes, overcomes, or significantly changes the realities of what 2024 was for them. Again, they're still clearly dealing with some issues. Again, they have lawsuits open. There is still a lot going on there that people had bad experiences in San Diego. I don't think being good on the pitch delegitimizes that, but it does sort of deepen the fact as part of that story, which is still going, that they are finding results right now, playing a really fun, stylish, enjoyable style of football. So let's push on to the field on what we're seeing right now and why San Diego was set up to surprise. They not only look better this year than they did last year, but right now they look better than a lot of the other teams in the league, despite that star loss, that talent loss. And I think they achieved this in a twofold shift. One was in roster construction and one was in style of play. Not unlike Angel City, who we talked about a couple weeks ago, San Diego has gotten a lot younger, which gives Eidevall kind of the ability to craft a new thing out of a team that was very sort of stuck in its singular tactical identity, and that was beginning to be a problem in 2024. The Wave became the first team in league history a couple weeks ago to start 3 17-year-olds in one regular season NWSL game. And those players are really talented. It's Kimi Asiano, Trinity Armstrong, and Melanie Barcenas. They're not in the starting squad because they're like young and developing. It's because they are legitimate good starting options in the NWSL right now in 2025. I think Trinity Armstrong in particular is going to be a big star in this league. If you just give it a little bit of time, she's not always going to pop off the stat sheet. She's a defender. She's been in the U.S. Women's National Team youth systems. She had a very good season in North Carolina before hopping out to join the league, the professional ranks. Fundamentals are there in a way where I think Trinity Armstrong is a name to circle for fans of the US, in addition to fans of the NWSL. You are going to get to know her name in the upcoming years. They also signed 2022 German international Gia Corley, looking like a very savvy pickup in the early going. And so suddenly they have this kind of new young core of, let's say, an age range of like 17 to 23-year-olds that are not only, again, young and promising, but are legitimate starting contenders for a good NWSL team in 2025. This next generation coming up, really, really good. And the way they were able to do that, one of it is the U18 mechanism. Obviously, they've done a nice job of doing direct signings for young players who want to start their professional careers before the age of 18. They also have been able to really kind of clean up in this post-college draft NWSL era. You look at Armstrong. They also signed Trinity Byers out of Texas. She is injured. She's dealing with a long-term injury. She is really, really good. When she is on, she is on. They also signed Quincy McMahon. This is a core of young talent that there is absolutely no way, if there was a traditional draft structure, that San Diego would have been able to sign, probably full stop as a group, but also just specifically without giving up further assets to get into the draft order to be able to pick up players like this. This is the new era of NWSL, where teams, if they can sell young players on the future, they don't have to give up assets to sign those players, and they don't have to wait for other teams to get a chance to kind of grab players that they want. The best pitch wins. And San Diego, for all of their troubles last year, seems to still have a pretty compelling pitch to get these players to sign for them. Fewer top line stars, which we'll again talk about, that does limit them a little bit, but they have retained the ability to attract young talent. And in this new kind of direct signing era, like I said, they don't have to wait. And this is how this turnover of results can happen so quickly. So the lack of a draft, the willingness to go young, strong talent ID, a good pitch to young players over time, promising group. That's the roster spot. San Diego's roster is in a really good spot right now, where it's not only good right now, but as they continue to develop, they should be getting better and better. But Idevol has also taken to the league in a better way than I probably expected. I think sometimes we sit here in the US and we're a little bit skeptical about what a European coach is going to be able to bring to this league. It's very different than some of the other leagues in the world. Everyone always talks about it. Fast, physical, highly transitional. You have to bring it every single week. You can't get precious about your style of play because you're going to get blown up. Now, we've seen good possession style teams, right? Like you've got North Carolina, who everything kind of but the scoring looks like something that even bucks trends for NWSL styling. But San Diego is kind of a really nice fusion under Idevol. They hold possession. They've dominated possession in this 3-game winning streak, top like above 60% every single game. But they're not overly precious about kind of slow playing out of the back, which is a common criticism for European style managers who maybe don't understand the speed of the press in the United States, and they want to move the ball and develop the ball with players who aren't able to do that at the tempo they need to. They move the ball quickly with a smart advancing passing structure. If you look at their pass maps, it is certainly flowing through the back line. That is what you see a lot with high possession teams. But the eyeball test, you're not just watching their center backs recycle the ball over and over and over again, and other teams just sort of sitting back. They do move the ball. They make it look really simple to not only make passes, but those passes are progressive. And so they kind of cut through this idea that you can hold possession, but you don't always have the opportunity to do something with it. They are always trying stuff. They're trying to get wide. They utilize their width really well. Maria Sanchez looks like a revitalized player on that left wing. They've got Delphine Cascarino on the right. They're really good at getting wide, but again, purposeful. They are sometimes doing the thing that isn't always my favorite, which is, kind of long ball crosses in the air, but those have been very effective. Those were the 2 goals that they scored this weekend. And so you like watching it. And I think, again, it's sort of bucking this idea that possession has to be boring, which is sometimes you can feel that way in the NWSL. They also have the strategic press. When the other team has the ball, they're very good at winning the ball up on the pitch and, again, moving the ball quickly the other way. They remind me a little bit more in what they're attempting of maybe some of those North Carolina teams of like 2018, 2019, but also they are able to do a little bit more in possession. So again, it's this kind of cool modern hybrid of a number of different styles. The 2 goals they score against Bay FC, good examples. Like I said, both of those utilized that width. Both of them were header goals. First one's a hammer by Kennedy Wesley, utilizing Sanchez's delivery. Again, Maria Sanchez has been put in this good position where she's not being asked to carry the entirety of the goal scoring load. That's not really the player that she is, but letting her focus on what she is really good at, which is that service, that passing ability, and getting into dangerous places out wide. And then Trinity Armstrong, again, kind of the big introduction. She gets a header goal in second half stoppage time to get the winner. Always love to see a defender be able to jump up above it all and score. Now the Wave aren't perfect. They let an equalizer in this first half. But they really kind of dominated this game. And I think the final pieces are maybe mental, which lead me to kind of my second point, which is that everything I've just said is incredibly positive, incredibly encouraging. And I think that this is like, this is a contender for a really good regular season finish. But I still think that they are missing that one final piece, that one star or 2. They could get greedy if they want to put them over the top. There's a lot about this team to like in what they're doing in the regular season early on. But as we know, the NWSL is like a playoff. You got to be the king of the playoffs or you're going to be walking home without much. I think to be able to take even a further step, which maybe that's not the goal this year, but if they did want to do that, I could see San Diego with that money cash that they have to be aggressive in sort of this transfer window, quote unquote transfer window, when the European leagues end and there's maybe talent interested in moving to the United States midsummer. They could commit to the long game of seeing which of these young players become stars in their own right. That's a valid approach. You just keep building incrementally and retaining the talent that you have. But if they want to probably go all the way this year, they need a complementary piece to, again, a player like Sanchez or Cascarino, or as we know, Kaylin Sheridan is a huge piece of the leadership structure and the defense, the Canadian goalkeeper Kaylin Sheridan to this team. A midseason transfer period, I think, would be really, really interesting for them because they're kind of scoring by committee. No attacker for the Wave has more than 2 goals on the season just far. They might just need a little bit more of a center point because this is a team that loves high volume possession in the final third. Imagine what they could do if they had sort of that focal finisher in the middle, back to goal or running to goal, to run alongside what they've got going on the wings. I also think the youth of this team is going to mean high highs and low lows. As we all know, consistency is probably the number one thing you learn year after year as a professional. So I think a player like Barcenas, for example, is starting because she is an NWSL quality talent with the ability to go beyond that. But she's also a teenager. She's going to have good games. She's going to have bad games. Maybe a stabilizing force in the midfield would be helpful. But just those things to kind of develop that consistency that would have them competing with what we call that quote unquote top 4. Crazy possession numbers. But again, they're doing good things with it. So I think a forward perhaps to help with that defensive counter press, the goal scoring, combining a little bit more with what Sanchez and Cascarino are doing, let that offense go supernova. Or I think on the flip side, like I said, maybe a veteran stabilizing midfield force would be really, really useful for them. So final thought on the Wave, as I kind of laid out, they are a really good example of how quickly teams can turn things around in the NWSL on the field, which we know. But I think this show is kind of turning into a reflection of like the different ways that can occur, whether it is kind of putting together that super team or whether it's utilizing the fact that there isn't a draft anymore to get better quickly, or whether like Angel City, just a more sort of classic youth movement. And San Diego's from the very beginning, dating from Girma to now, their talent ID is really strong and they're pitching players on something that the players are excited about very, very clearly. But the question for me to leave to the San Diego Wave here in early May is great. You had top players go, you replaced them with really talented young players. But with all of those questions of 2024, can they retain them? Or is this more of a win now project because San Diego they're sellers and they're not buyers? And I think that is the ultimate question for San Diego now in the context of some of the struggles they had last year. Is this a setup for like a 5-year building dynasty? Or is this a team that is always going to be stuck now in this cycle of strong talent ID, good development, but then those players move on? The Late Sub is part of the Just Women Sports Network. This show is written by Claire Watkins and produced and edited by Parker Fenton. To get more of your favorite women's sports content, subscribe to the Just Women Sports newsletter and follow Just Women Sports across all your favorite channels.